The first thing, the first part of our research paper is what we call as an introduction. Is an introduction. Hello? Yes. So the first thing that we have to look at in our papers is what we call as introduction section. And introduction sections are very useful because they set the hook. That is, they capture the attention and interest of the reader. If you look at yourself and analyze how you read and how we read research papers, you would often observe that we read, the first thing that we read in a research paper is an abstract. And then if we find the abstract interesting, we go to the introduction section, and usually after the introduction section, we take a call whether we want to read it or we just want to leave it at that. So people usually would read abstract and introduction section and will take a call on whether they would want to read further and further or no. So you have to be good at setting the hook and capturing the attention and interest of the reader. So what is an introduction section? The first part of the paper, which Debangshu also asked before the break. So the introduction section, first of all, it should not be more than 3 or 4 pages. It should not be very lengthy. Maybe 2 pages is a good thing, maybe maximum 3 pages, definitely not more than 4. So 2 to 3 pages is a good length of an introduction section, and it should very succinctly, that is in a very short space, introduce to the reader what do we know about this topic, what we don't know, what will we learn, and so what. So what, remember the so what question. So what means what is the contribution that I am going to make to the literature. So what do we know, what we don't know, what will we learn, and so what. That is, why is this important and what is the contribution that I'm going to make. Let me show you an example. So this is a paper that I published based on my research, and I shared this also with you earlier. Now this is, look at the introduction section, and the title was looking at leadership and creative performance. Now, introduction section is, as I said, is it starts here and it is just about a page of the article. It is not even more than maybe 1.5 pages, not more than that. Now, what am I doing? I am saying that, well, I am trying to explore leadership and creative performance behaviors in R&D laboratories, examining the mediating role of justice perception. So I am interested in looking at how is leadership related to creative performance in a R&D context. So what do I do is I first introduce the readers to the context, right? Remember the talk about the contextualization. In this, my contextualization is an R&D context. Leadership is a very well-researched area, but still you can, I was able to publish these articles because I was able to contextualize properly the role of leadership in a R&D context. So I talk about R&D is a driving force of economy. R&D groups and organizations are involved in design and development of processes and lead to superior performance. Then I give focus of these, give a few details about this. I define employee creativity, which is defined as production of novel and useful ideas, is one of the key drivers of growth, performance, and valuation in organizations. Engaging in behaviors that drive creative processes and outcomes is an integral part of R&D professionals' role requirement. Therefore, I say that the identification of key factors that can foster and sustain R&D professionals' engagement in creative behaviors carries significant implications for enhancing organizational competitiveness, but has not received much attention from the research community. So if you see, this paper was published in 2014, and all my references here are post 2004. That is last 10 years, 2006, 2009, 2010. So if you look at it, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to state, why is R&D important? R&D is a context that is important. And second is, what do we know? What do we not know? So here I am saying that the identification of key factors that can promote and foster R&D professionals' engagement is important, but has not received attention from the research community. So we do not know this enough. So now again, I'm talking about how is R&D, how is this context different from other contexts? Due to ambiguous, unique, and inherently uncertain process of innovation, R&D units must be managed quite differently from other work units where the work is routine. The output and performance measures are usually quite different, and so on. So, however, R&D leaders are usually selected as much for their technical expertise as their leadership skill. Although leading creative and innovative individuals requires leaders to possess certain skills in addition to technical expertise, skill in handling interpersonal problems among members of R&D project is not something for which R&D leaders have been formally trained. So I am again problematizing the whole thing. I am saying that R&D is a new context. R&D is an important context, but we do not know how R&D leaders impact employ creative behaviors in the context of R&D. So now I say, come to what am I doing here right now? The present study examines the relationship between leadership and employee creativity in R&D context. Most of our understanding of management of innovations comes from anecdotes, with very few systematic studies linking management practices to innovative outcomes for R&D units. Despite calls for research on leadership, a review of literature shows that only a small percentage of leadership have been conducted in R&D organizations. And again, look at, when I say small percentage of leadership studies have been conducted, I am quoting very recent 2011, 2013, 2007 studies. Right? Thus, more research is needed to provide a deeper understanding of leadership needs of R&D professionals in order to help leaders develop effective interventions to this. And then finally, I talk about here, I talk about role of fairness a little bit. And then I say that the results of this study, so what question, or why is it important, or the contributions to the literature and to our knowledge. The results of this study are integrated into a set of guidelines for effective management of R&D professionals. The significance of this investigation is in its potential to provide additional insights into the complex issue of employee creativity and R&D leadership. By better understanding the role of leadership in promoting employee creativity and the processes lying beneath this relationship, leaders are likely to be better prepared to foster a climate conducive to individual creativity and organizational innovation. So the first thing that I'm trying to state is R&D is important. We need to test the impact of leadership, R&D leadership and creativity. Then I'm also looking at the mediating role of fairness perceptions for the relationship between leadership and employee creativity. And therefore, finally, I come to the point of what are my contributions and why is this study important. And in just one, less than a page, I talk about what is these aspects of introductions that I am talking about. So you have to, what can you do? You can quote a trend, can a quote or a trend can be an effective starting point. So at times you can quote some trends. Let me show you another paper. This is a paper that we published in personal review. So here, if you see, we are talking about attrition of managers has emerged as an issue of serious concern for employers and policymakers. A recent global survey, a recent global a recent global survey of 800 chief executives has revealed that managerial talent retention is the top issue facing CEOs and ranks 6th and 7th among European and US CEOs respectively. Estimates of the losses for each manager vary from 1,000. In addition, the replacement cost and loss of competitive industry secret has significant implication. An understanding of factors that can minimize managerial turnover has significant implications. So again, if you see what we are doing in the introduction section is right up front, we are presenting a trend, we are problematizing, we are saying that this is an important issue that needs to be looked at because the trends are showing that there is so much cost involved, there is so much issue here, and therefore there is a need to study this area. There is a need to so the importance of the context, importance of the question is put right upfront, which is the so what or why is it important for us. And then we go to the next thing is we talk about researchers have identified contextual factors that influence turnover intention. We directly come to our construct. Job characteristics are recognized as important work environment antecedent of turnover intention. Uh, However, literature examining the relationship between job characteristic and turnover intentions has suffered from these major limitations. So again, now using in the introduction right up front, we are saying what do we don't know? What do we don't know? Beyond confirming their direct effects, the underlying mechanisms through which job characteristics affect turnover intentions have not been explored. That means the process through which job characteristics impact employee turnover has not been studied. While turnover theorists suggest the effects of antecedents are contingent on personality, a majority of the studies have adopted a universalistic perspective and examined only direct effects of antecedents. This has resulted in a dearth of knowledge of how personal factors make job characteristics more or less important. So again, presenting another limitation of the literature, which is going to build groundwork for what we are going to do. And third, research regarding turn is limited, uh, manage, right? And so understanding will be important. And then we are talking about it has been done in the context of Western cultural values, may not be effective in other environments, and therefore we are looking for non-Western samples needs to be tested. So if you see, I was talking about in each study having at least about 2 to 3 contributions. So we are saying we will look at job characteristic, the process, the mechanism through which job characteristic and turnover is related. Then we are going to look at the role of personality. Then we are going to look at the role of non-Western sample. And then if you look at this right next, we talk about the using or anchored in the job demands resources theory. This study examines the role of work engagement as an intermediating variable through which job characteristic influence managerial turnover intentions, right? Yeah, and so we talk about this, then we talk about another theory, drawing insights from conservation of resources theory. This study tests the moderating effects of conscientiousness and important personality factor on this relationship. And then we talk about what are the contributions that we make. This study makes multiple contributions to both theory and practice. By testing underlying process for the job characteristic turnover intention, the study advances our understanding of this relationship. Integrating job demand resources theory with uh, conservation of resources theory, the study aims to shed new lights on the underlying process as well as boundary condition. By adopting a personal situation interactionist approach to examine, the study adds to our understanding of the qualifying effects of individual differences. And finally, the study investigates the above mentioned relationships in a overlooked yet important sample, managers in a non-Western Indian business context. So you see, in the introduction section, we are talking about what is the research question, why is it important, what has been the work that has been done, and what is the limitation in the literature around these ideas, what is the theoretical framework that we are building, and what is the contributions that we are going to make to the literature. So this is more like a promise that we are making to the reader, that this study will tell you these things, which is the process, the qualifying conditions, and showing the results in a non-Western Indian business context. So that is the role of an introduction section, where you present all of these things in a very short summary in not more than 2-3 pages, so that if somebody is willing to look at it, they get interested, and they don't have to, they know what is going to come in this paper, and they have sort of clarity of what is going to be there in this paper, and why is it useful, and why is it interesting for them. So you can bridge different conversations. You can talk about incompleteness and need for new knowledge. These are different ways, and you can quote a trend to be an effective starting point. Not studied in India is not enough.
I
Okay.
have a question.
Yes, yes,
So as we understand, we can problematize based on the literature, and
absolutely.
we can and we can also problematize based on the realities grounded in practice.
Yes, yes.
So which is a better way to start with? So
I would say use quoting a trend is a good way. So if you get some practitioners survey like what I just showed, if you can quote some numbers, that sets the relevance of your work. But you will then have to go to the literature anyways, academic literature, to show what has been done and what has not yet been done, and what are you going to do in this.
thank you, sir. Yeah, yes, sir.
Not studied in India is not enough. So let me show you another paper, which is also what I shared with you. Uh, you see, here what we are seeing is, if you look at the title of the paper, this is the empirical study of dimensionality of justice and its relationship with citizenship behavior in the Indian context. Right? So this is a paper which very clearly says that I want to test the dimensionality of organization justice in the Indian context. So the present study explores the dimensionality of organization justice in the Indian context, and then we talk about different justice, and we then test its relationship with OCP. Now, if you look at it, so in the introduction, my question is very clear. I want to examine the dimensionality of justice in the Indian context. So I have to now talk very clearly as to why what we have seen in the Western context may not be applicable to the Indian context. So why studying the relationships in the Indian context is going to be important. Why is the Indian context different in the first place, right? Now, so the right in the introduction, I am talking about, even though there exists a wide amount of research on organization justice, we know relatively less about how employees from other countries make fairness judgments, right? Employees' perception of fairness requires considering the prevailing cultural standards in which his or her organization operates. Researchers have argued that uncritical adaptation of HR practices and techniques evolved in context of Western cultural values may not be effective in other socio-cultural environments. Culture may have little effect on the type of processes used to determine outcomes, but it does have a profound effect on the manner in which these processes are implemented. So now I'm talking about the role of culture, national culture. In different cultures, people have either independent or interdependent self-construals. The difference between these is the extent to which people see themselves as connected to others versus distinct from others. In individualistic cultures such as North America, the emphasis is more on independent self-control. In contrast, in collectivist cultures such as India and China, the emphasis is on interdependent self-control. Consequently, North Americans can be expected to be more sensitive to injustice as it may compromise the expression of their uniqueness and hamper achievement of personal goals.
So I have a question.
Yes,
Can I ask?
yes,
In that
please.
area, in that yellow marked area, you have mentioned that in different cultures, etc., Marcus and Kittam, 1991. But
Yes.
thereafter, 3-4 lines, the difference up to that, up to I say up to before the consequently area, self-construal, there is no mention. Is
Yes.
it your view, or is it the Lion Cramzano 2009 who's that person's view?
Which one? Here in this, right? So this,
Yes, yes.
yes,
The difference between interdependent and independent
yes,
self-construals
yes.
up to there's up to North America or something
This
like
one,
that, up to North
so,
America. Is it
yes,
your view?
yes. So in here in these
There is
lines,
yes, these lines, there is no mention of any reference.
no mention of any reference. So this is built based on what Marcus and Kitamaya wrote in 1991, and my understanding or my interpretation of their uh, uh, definitions of independent and interdependent self-construals.
Okay, I got it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And then this line is coming from what Lee and Cropenzano said in 2009, that they are more sensitive. And again, this is my writing, which is people would be willing to tolerate greater amounts of injustice in collectivist cultures, where the focus may be more on maintaining interpersonal harmony. So now we say I go ahead and talk about, even when there is agreement across cultures on principles of justice, there may be disagreement about the justice criteria and the justice practices. So I talk about all of this, and you see there is so much that I have tried to write to bring about the importance of culture, importance of society, and how people use how justice is going to play out differently in collectivist cultures compared to individual in Western cultures, and therefore I write that the relationships between these justice and employee attitudes may display greater cross-cultural variations because what constitutes appropriate interpersonal interaction in one culture may be considered unacceptable in another culture. In a two-session study of Indian, and so again this is, so the present study is based on the premise that the concept of justice is probably universal across cultures, but that it may be manifested in different ways. The work is exploratory and is motivated by two research questions. First, whether the justice dimensions propounded in the Western context are valid for the Indian context. Second, having explored the dimensionality of justice construct, the study explores the relationship between organization justice and OCB, an important organization behavior construct that has implications for organization performance. And this is the introduction where again I say why is it important, what do we don't know, right? What are we going to do, and how will it help the what is the contribution that we are going to make in the study. So what I want to demonstrate is, please understand that not studied in India, just saying that this has not been studied in India and so I am going to do this is not enough. You've got to really talk about why the things that you are doing and why the differences or expectations of differences that you expect, you have to justify those expectations and clearly talk about what would be the difference between India and the other cultural contexts that you, with respect to the phenomena that you are studying. So spending more time on introductions is very common. You've got to really think about how you want to present because this is the first part of the paper and it will sort of capture readers' attention, make them interested in understanding what you are going to talk about in the rest of the paper. So how do you do it? Start by writing a rough draft or a first draft of an introduction section. So right in the beginning, because it sets a guiding light, it will tell you how you have to structure your paper going forward, because that is the first part of your paper. Then, as you write the other parts of the manuscript, go back to the introduction and keep revising it as you write the other parts of the paper. As you get more ideas, go back and revise the introduction and see if you want to add, if you have got some new ideas to present your introduction section. And what people say is, at least 10 or more revisions is not uncommon. I would say, if not 10, at least 3-4 iterations, introduction sections should go through, because you've got to read and reread the introduction section so that you sort of very crisply state what is it that you are trying to do in this study, what is it that you know, what is it that you don't know, why is it important, and what is the contribution that you are going to make through this
So,
study.
Lekha here, is it a good idea to keep versions of these drafts, or would it unnecessarily add to the text? We should just keep redrafting what you've written.
I think you should just keep redrafting because they will undergo a lot of revisions. You don't need to keep drafts of them. Have one and then keep revising them. Once you have a final draft which you think is uh, is ready, maybe take a backup of that file and just in case something happens to it. And if you are targeting to multiple journals, in the sense, don't submit to multiple journals at the same time, but you can have one version for journal, so you can format the citations in a different way. You can have another journal which has a different citation style or referencing style. So you can have different versions for different journals if you like.
So, is it ethical to do that, simultaneous submissions to at least 2 journals to keep users safe?
No, that is why I said don't submit to multiple journals. That is completely unethical. What I meant was, if you want to maintain 2 different referencing styles based on the 2 different kinds of journals that you want to submit, if it gets rejected from one, you want to submit. But let me say that don't because also if it gets rejected from one, you will have to revise that paper again. So maintaining versions of the document as you are writing the paper is not needed. Let me end at that.
Okay.
Hmm? Okay, so I think with that, let us come to the second part, which is